Hello, BookTube. Well, about a week ago, I asked you all for questions for my 6,000 subscriber milestone, and now we're going to do the answers. I got many questions, many wonderful questions because you all are great, and I jotted them all down. It's 5 pages of questions. I'm going to try, believe it or not, to get them all done in one video. So we'll see. We'll see how long it will go. So let's see. We'll start with on page number 1. Lillian Neisvender says, "Who is your favorite historical person?" A parade of names came to mind, and then I remembered very dutifully that my favorite historical person is me Sainted Ma. A.W. Shubar has a few questions. Do you have any siblings? Yes, I do. What do you think of caffeine? Do you drink much tea or coffee? I don't drink any tea or coffee. No, I don't have any need of artificial stimulants. As far as caffeine goes, it is the mildest, probably most benign of the world's major drug addictions. I mean, in the world, there are 9 billion people, and of those 9 billion people, regardless of what some World Health Organization's polling data might show you, of those 9 billion people, probably 7.5 billion are tobacco addicts. Probably 6 billion of those people are caffeine addicts. I'd say 3 billion are alcohol addicts. By far the staggering number is tobacco addicts. And that is something where you are sucking into your lungs directly a collation of 15 different carcinogens 35 times a day. So when measured on the yardstick like that, caffeine is fairly benign. It's a chemical suspension that doesn't do wonders for your nerves, for the proteins that sheath your nerves. It doesn't do wonders for that. And I have talked to many people who can't live without their coffee, and they have, over the years, they have all described to me what it feels like to have a caffeine high. And although it is a jittery kind of energy, it's not anything like the real energy of being well rested and attentive to what you're doing. It's a fake energy. It worries me that so many people need it, but I have no major objections to it. It's mainly because, unlike alcohol addiction, it cannot cause a total stranger to kill me by accident with a car. And unlike tobacco addiction, it doesn't stink. It doesn't absolutely stink. A tobacco addict who steps outside of his front door a quarter of a mile away from me is instantly detectable to me. Even if I'm not looking in that direction, even if I don't see him enter onto the street, the smell extends in all directions immediately. So maybe that's it. Maybe it's just selfish. And A.W. Shubar continues. As a person from Massachusetts, what do you think of Mitt Romney? Well, I have lots of opinions about Mitt Romney, but I'm not sure what the question means. Mitt Romney is not from Massachusetts. He carpet-bagged on the state for the bare minimum of time necessary in a fake apartment that he never visited in order to run as a candidate for the state. Never cared about Massachusetts at all. Lied through his teeth when he said he did. He only wanted this as a stepping stone to something else. I hate the loopholes in American political law that allows people to shop around for a state venue like that, get an apartment somewhere, and make that happen. When you're running for a Senate seat, that place should be your home. When you're running for a governorship, that place should be your home. So as far as my opinions about Mitt Romney just in general, he's a quintessential plastic politician. He doesn't have any opinions. He doesn't remember a lot of times what he has said 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 2 years ago on any subject. He doesn't have any strong convictions. He strikes me as probably a very decent family man. But someone with no more call to be running for high office than the man in the moon. Unless the call to run for high office is simply the addiction to aggrandizement, to the spotlight. A fairly normal politician, in other words. Nothing to write home about, no matter which state you call home. Let's see. Did you ever consider a career in academia? For about 5 seconds. I did, yes. Would you ever write a history book or a biography? And if so, what subject? Well, some of you will remember that I have flirted very seriously with writing a big, fat biography of President William Howard Taft. And believe it or not, I still haven't completely abandoned that idea. I still routinely think about that. I've already written a novel about Taft, and then I extensively rewrote it. What I want to do is, if I were going to do that, write a biography, it would be him, and that's what it would be. I still think about it. I still think about it. My writing docket is pretty much booked for 2019, but I still think about it. And let's see here. Oh, and the last question that A.W. Shubar asks is, what issue faced me when I first joined BookTube? I mention it sometimes. I allude to it. It is now, thankfully, distant in the past, and it's a terribly minor thing. That the reason that it stays on my mind is mainly because of personal disappointment with some of the people who were involved. But other than that, it was a fairly garden variety social media storm in a teacup. I made a video last week in BookTube, I think it was, talking about a bunch of booktubers who had just gone to a major convention. And I had been watching their videos. Since then, I have learned that they are the wrong booktubers for me to watch. That's all there is to it. They have vast audiences, so they're obviously right for somebody, but they weren't right for me. And I was complaining about how they didn't seem to me to be real readers at all. I couldn't picture them reading. Actually sitting down and reading when the camera was off. I don't believe that I am the only person to watch some of those videos and have that impression. I refuse to believe that. But in the comments of that video, I said something. My comment was, somebody asked me, do you really think they're not readers? Something like that. And I said, well, I just can't picture it. I can't picture them with their Klieg lights and their blush, just sitting down and reading a book. And that quote, I did actually have a male booktuber in mind when I said that, but since then I have realized that it was a dumb thing to say anyway, regardless of gender. But it doesn't matter. It was a dumb comment to make, not only because it was physical. I was commenting on someone's physical appearance, which is kind of dumb to do, but also because it amplified a comment in the video itself that I probably shouldn't have made. How am I to know? It's like so many people on YouTube say, you only see a tiny fraction of someone's life. Not mine, you see all of mine, but a lot of people, you see just a tiny fraction of their life. Somebody could easily spend a whole day reading and it wouldn't be reflected in their videos. My point was that it isn't reflected in the way they talk about the books. But either way, someone who hates me pounced on that one line in my comments field, cut it out, took it out of whatever miserable context it had. The context doesn't excuse it. But they took that line and fed it up to an even bigger booktuber. And she decided to, as the kids say, put it on blast. She posted it on social media with the line, "Everyday sexism, y'all." And got the usual barrage of virtue signaling angry and fake angry responses about who is this guy, how dare he kill him, kill his children, use a time machine to go back in time and kill everyone that's ever been a progenitor of his, maybe kill all humans on Earth because he is a human, something, the usual social media hysterical overreaction to a minor thing. And that wasn't enough for her, this big booktuber. That wasn't enough for her. She kept it going. She kept saying, come on, guys, who's going to respond? Come on, guys, we're not going to let this fade. Come on, guys, who's going to do something? Obviously intending her legions of followers to step over the line. I think it's fairly easy to infer that. Certainly, had one of those followers stepped over the line, my lawyer was eager to convince a jury that that's exactly what was being done, that a goal was being set to destroy someone by stepping over the line, mail him something that's dead, attack him at home, something like that. Either way, it was a very ugly thing, and even then, it wouldn't have bothered me so much. It stuck with me for years. And even then, that wouldn't have bothered me so much, although I was hashtagged. I got my own hashtag, which is not an experience that I recommend. That wouldn't have bothered me so much, except that quite a few of the people who made, of course, every virtue signaling booktuber on God's green earth felt the compulsion to make a video jumping up and down on my head, usually without knowing anything about the video, usually without having seen the comment or taken a step back and thought, is that really worth condemning someone's entire life forever? Is that really worth it? The thing that bothered me the most about this for years is that a lot of the people who did that were people whose work I had supported, people I'd been in contact with via email. And not one of them, not one of those people sent me an email saying, boy, that was a dumb thing to write. What were you thinking? Not one of them did that. Instead, they jumped in the opposite direction with equal energy. Oh, let me make a video attacking this guy at length. Oh, let me make a video calling this guy the scum of the earth for 30 solid minutes. Only one booktuber jumped on that bandwagon and then saw that it was a bandwagon and jumped off. That was Richard Denny. A lot of you will know him. He's a very good booktuber. The thing that kills me is that some of the people who made those ad hominem, stupid, braying, adolescent response videos were also good booktubers. That leaves a taste in my mouth even now, but that's what it was. It was a tiny little hashtag Tempest in a Teacup that was over fairly quickly. It didn't feel quick at the time. When it was happening, it felt like it was lasting forever. And I made a response video way, way, way back then, apologizing and also warning my viewers that a single comment on a single video is not grounds to call someone a sexist and condemn their entire life. but it's over now. It's all done now. Oddly enough, funnily enough, that same year I was both hashtagged on social media, which is negative. It was in a negative context, and I also trended on Reddit in a positive context. For some weird reason, one of my reviews trended on Reddit. So it was a weird year. It was my introduction to social media. Well, let's see here. Lydia Joy says, what do you think of Confederacy of Dunces? She mentions the tragic story of the author. Those of you who don't know the story, this author, John Kennedy Toole, wrote this manic comic novel about a character, Ignatius Reilly, who is a total misfit in the world. Now, the book would be, if it were written today, it would be condemned for cultural appropriation. The author would be condemned for making fun of autistic people. Ignatius Reilly is obviously severely autistic in a very funny way. The book is actually just a comedy about a misfit. And he submitted it everywhere and got rejected over and over and over again, and finally died. And later, his mother was submitting the dot print matrix, Xerox copy, and it got accepted. Now it's a treasured classic of American comic literature, and that is a very sad story. I like the book. I don't think it's possible not to like Confederacy of Dunces. I haven't read it in a long time. I should probably sooner or later that will be a Penguin classic, or someone will reprint it. I look forward to that. Let's see here. I jotted down all the names, so I'm reading my own writing. Alicia Perez says, where is your Boston accent? Well, you might not remember since I've made a million videos, but I did, to tweak Caleb one day, I did make a poetry reading that I read in a Boston accent. And it was kind of funny for me. It was painful for the rest of you. But in terms of my Boston accent, keep in mind three things. One, I have traveled a lot, and that buffs away your accent if you're not a bad traveler. Two, I'm very good with languages, and that also buffs away your accent if you want to do the language justice. And three, there are plenty of schools of scholarship that say that I'm not from Boston at all. Okay? So where's my Boston accent? I could put it on if you wanted, but it's not unlike some other regional accents, it's not a pleasant accent at all. Let's see here. Literary Gladiators says, who is your favorite U.S. president? And that would be John F. Kennedy, for a number of reasons, not least of which that he saved the world from nuclear annihilation. We'd all be dead if it weren't for him. Alex Downey wants to know a good Apollo 11 book, and there are a slew of them this year. This year is the anniversary, so there have been others. The Apollo Moonshot has had many, many good books, but I find it hard to pick one. There's a great graphic novel, there's a great historical approach, there's a great technical approach, there are tons of great visual volumes, but this is the year to look at. I think he mentioned that he's doing a book club and wants to know which is the good one. If I were you, I would go to the nearest big library. They're bound to have a display of lots of different books, and just go through the one that's going to fit your book club best, because this is the year of bounties for Apollo 11 books. Eleni Nicolina asked me, do you know that there is a big novel about the parents of Erasmus? And yes, of course I do. She's referring to a big, fat historical novel called The Cloister and the Hearth by Charles Reade, that once upon a time, long time ago, was a runaway bestseller. And I mean a popular bestseller as well. Everybody knew every incident in the book. They knew all the characters. it has a lot going to it. It's not just, a monk and a nun in a love story. There's all sorts of adventure elements involved at all in the whole thing. It, I believe, holds up well. I think The Cloister and the Hearth has been out of print for a long time, and it may stay out of print. That would be unfortunate. I would hope somebody would reprint that. And of course, it's fanciful. When it comes to an actual account of the parents of Erasmus, the great Dutch humanist Erasmus, it's fanciful, to say the least. but yes, I do know it, definitely. And Eleni Nicolina also wants to know the best Henry Fielding biography. If a really good Henry Fielding biography, one that fits the greatness of the author, is ever written, I'll let you know. Edwin Perry says, why am I a fan of romance novels, even though A, I'm not a big fan of fiction, and B, many people look down on romance novels? And the first part of that, I realize that I'm pretty brutal with the made-up stories here on this channel, but I do like fiction. It's just, a lot of it tests my patience. I think it's given this kind of reverence in popular literary culture that it very much does not deserve. Very much does not deserve. An author, sitting in their workroom in between hits of tobacco, moving people around on an imaginary chessboard, saying, "Well, now I'm going to have him divorced." Well, I know I said 5 chapters ago that he was acrimoniously divorced, and now I'm saying that it was a happy divorce, but don't ask me to go back and fix it. And don't ask me to write him as if he actually did go through either a happy or an acrimonious divorce. No, I can't be bothered with that. The middle of the 20th century, I blame Norman Mailer and the crew that came after him. The middle of the 20th century with this, yes, I'm trafficking in unseen realms, created an idea for literary fiction. The whole concept of literary fiction, and marketed it very heavily, and publishers bought right in. And I think there's a certain kind of reader that likes that kind of pretentious to-do, and that always gets my hackles up because so much literary fiction is just so bad, just so bad. And by the same token, that's one of the reasons why I like romance novels, because they have the strength of their convictions. Because they don't have plot holes, because they're not inept, because their author means it. Their author means it. And that means a lot. The latest slim, wan literary novel to come along, upper middle class Connecticut divorce, I read those things like chock-a-block, buckets of them. And I almost never come across one where I feel like the author means it. And anything in it. That'll do it right there. Plus, romances are such fun. They don't strive for the moon. They're not trying to remap the what was it the one review wrote? I think about the goldfinch, to remap the emotional, rework the emotional map of our heart. For please sake. No, I like it because the stakes are low, and it's usually quite enjoyable. Let's see here. Hugo MFS asks, are you already thinking about 7K questions? I firmly believe that this channel will never reach 7,000 subscribers. I firmly believe that. So no, I'm not. Let's see here. John Dixon asks, Laszlo Krasna Horake? Any thoughts on him? No, of course not. I don't have any thoughts on him. I don't know how to pronounce his name. I've never read a word that he's ever written. Let's see here. PK's Book says, if I could get my hands on one signed, personalized first edition from any author, what would it be? As chance would have it, I actually own 4 books that fit that description. And that's the first part of the answer. And the second part of the answer is that I don't care about books as physical objects. That I don't care about first editions. I don't care about inscriptions or presentation copies or printing mistakes or anything like that. Not anything like that. Don't care about it at all. The only reason I care about the inscriptions that I have in the 4 books that I mentioned is because the authors meant a lot to me. That's all. So I wouldn't, for instance, get a rare Fitzgerald or whatever the current answer would be. Andrew Cole says, do you have any tips for shopping at used bookstores? Tip number 1, if you're in Boston, do it with me. Let me know ahead of time. We'll go to the battle together. Your books will be on me. But in general terms, it depends on your how fastidious you are as a reader. I myself try always to remember when I'm shopping for used books, I try always to remember to control my enthusiasm. If I see a volume that I really, really want, don't grab it and pay for it. Even if you haven't seen it before in a used bookstore, grab it and examine it. If the binding is broken, it's not going to do you any good anyway. If it's covered in that obnoxious neon yellow highlighting from some stupid high school student, why would you get it? Even if you haven't seen it before. I always make sure to thoroughly examine my books before I buy them. But I can give you more tips when we're browsing together at the Brattle Bookshop here in Boston. Let's see here. Jessica W. says, what did you think of the new Spider-Man movie? I'm afraid I didn't like it. I'm afraid I didn't like it. I myself think, I know that the box office says otherwise and the viewing public says otherwise, but I think that live-action movie versions of Spider-Man are cursed. I firmly believe that in 100 years, people will look back and say, wow, the curse of Spider-Man, so that's when it started. The first live-action Spider-Man was a grumpy 50-year-old 5-pack-a-day tobacco addict who was pudgy and a miserable actor. None of those things describe Peter Parker. And so the movies worked, what little bits of them worked in spite of that. Worked in spite of the guy in the costume. The second Spider-Man was how do the kids put it? A raging douchebag. Someone who radiates. I mean, some young men, they're raging douchebags, but you don't know it until you spend a little time with them. Andrew Garfield radiates it. You can tell 1,000 miles away. You can tell literally through a screen that he is a raging douchebag. Someone who had screaming fits on set about wearing the mask because I've got 4 pounds of product in my hair. And I think when you watch those movies, it comes screaming off the movies that, okay, it's Spider-Man, it's Uncle Ben, it's Aunt May, it's villains, it's a hero's journey, but it's also a raging douchebag in the lead, and I don't want to watch him. He can't hide it, and I don't want to watch him. We don't like raging douchebags. Normal people don't. And the third live Spider-Man is young enough to be obnoxious on its own. No, first of all, he's a terrible actor. Second, he's an uncontrollable tobacco addict. I mean, he doesn't have any lips. Doesn't have any facial features. He looks like a wax museum dummy because all he does is smoke, and tinnily, leadenly emote. He is probably, of the three of them, the least believable teenager, and he's the closest one to the teenager of all of them. I know no one thinks this way other than me. The Spider-Man movies will always be fan favorites. Fan will always be debating which is their favorite Spider-Man. But I really think that I thought for years, this is clearly cursed. You can't find a good person to play this role. So I think maybe you should retire it. Just stop trying. Now, that's never going to happen because Spider-Man is a world property. So there's always going to be a Spider-Man movie, a new Spider-Man movie. But I thought for a while, this isn't possible. You should just retire it. Just retire the whole idea. Then I saw Into the Spider-Verse. I saw the animated Miles Morales, and I saw the light. There you go. That's your Spider-Man. Just keep that. Just keep that forever. Do 6 movies of that. But that's not going to happen either. Although, I should use this opportunity to point out that if you haven't seen Into the Spider-Verse and you're a comic book fan, you're missing out on an incredible experience. Find it and see it. I don't even know it's on Netflix, but find it and see it. Oh God, we can't take this long with every question. So where are we doing here? Where did we go? Where did we leave off? Okay, Jacqueline Henry says, where do I find your opinion of J.R. Ward, and also what's your email? I think I've written about J.R. Ward a couple of times, but I can gladly give you a thumbnail opinion now. J.R. Ward is fantastic. Just fantastic. Totally guilty pleasure, but just fantastic to read, especially if you're up on the series. If you've got the whole thing under your belt, then a new book is a cause for joy. And my email is stdonahue@gmail. St. my last name, and then Gmail. And I urge you all to email me about anything you want. I'm online all the time during the day, from midnight until probably 7 or 8. I'm usually offline, but all the rest of the time I work on my computer, on my bed, with no pants on. So I'd love to hear from you. Let's see here. Where do we go here? Okay, Books, Trees, and Other Fibers says, do you have any stories about spies or espionage from your travels? No, I don't. As far as I know, I never met a spy on my travels. How did I navigate the visa and travel permits in tricky countries and situations? That's a good question. I have many stories along those lines. When I was crossing land borders, the easiest way was just to avoid checkpoints, which was easy to do in some ways because I was fairly handy, and hard to do in other ways because I was always accompanied by a big crowd of dogs, and that tends to stick out. But it's the worst thing in the world. It's the worst thing in the world when you're in some, backwater country down in the south of Africa, and you come across a checkpoint you weren't expecting, and suddenly you're faced with four really bored and really stoned teenagers, all of whom have rifles. There's no accountability. There's no law. There's no one who would ever even know if they just opened fire on you and your dogs. There were some hairy situations that weren't. I wouldn't advise. Now it's all easy, and that's the follow-up question here. Is it harder today? It is much easier, of course, to travel today, but it's harder to have a travel experience today. It's all packaged. It's all very litigious. It's all very border conscious, and it's a huge number of people doing it. So you will go off the beaten path and travel by boat and by hydroplane and get to that little corner of nowhere, and you'll find 6 stoners there because they read the same Men's Journal article that you did, and that didn't exist back when I was doing this. So there were still extremely unexplored corners of the world that you could get to. Let's see. Mary Tumulty asks, can a reader determine if a translation is done, if the translator's done a good job, even if the reader hasn't read multiple translations? And it's tricky because there's a two-pronged answer here. On one reading of your question, you want to know, can you tell how good a translation is if you don't know the original? And the answer is no, of course you can't. But really, the main job of a translation is to get that out of the way, is to remove that from the equation. So there is a way to tell whether or not the translator is doing a good job without having read other translations or without being able to read the original. And that's by reading the book in front of you. Is it actually a good reading experience, or does it seem weird? Do word choices or rhetorical cadence come out of nowhere and feel weird? If that's true, then those things take you out of the reading experience. And if you're brought out of the reading experience awkwardly, unproductively, then the translator is doing a bad job. In my opinion, anyway. I'd love to hear stories. Most of you, I'm assuming, have this question at one time or another. Bookish people usually do. They come across a work in translation, whether it's a famous thing like War and Peace, or a new thing. The translation world is a little bit more adventurous now than it ever has been, and they wonder, how do I know if it's a good translation? Yeah, I sympathize. I get that a lot. I write about that a lot. Let's see here. Jennifer Madden says, have you read any JG Ballard? And if so, what do I think? And she says, greetings from Ireland. And I'm telling you, Jennifer, it was the greetings from Ireland that saved you from a 30-minute rant about asking me a question that starts with, have you ever read? Yes, we had Laszlo Krasna Kahorkai up a few minutes ago, but I myself, I don't mean to impute motives here, but I myself firmly believe that name was asked specifically because the asker knew that I would not know the author. I don't think, but when it comes to JG Ballard, have I ever read JG Ballard? I have read JG Ballard, yes, I have read all of JG Ballard. I'm not blown away by him. I know he has all sorts of big fans, but I'm not one of them. An average reading experience, nothing ever blew me away. And in all the stuff that I've read of his. Although, I should point out, I'm a broken record on the subject, but I don't think I have read a collection of his book reviews. I'm pretty sure his book reviews have never been collected. So, who knows? He might still have a chance. Let's see here. Nathan Lambert says, any particular passages for Sunday school? If I were to continue to do close readings of biblical passages, do I have any in mind? I, of course, have lots in mind. I would just go through the Bible. Not line by line, because there's lots of dead space, but there's lots of great stuff, too. I would just go through all of that. And also, have I read any Brazilian literature? Do I have any recommendations? And in parentheses, he writes that his girlfriend is Brazilian. And first, on behalf of all jealous men everywhere, I want to point out, that's a hell of a parenthetical. You lucky guy. But yes, I have read quite a bit of Brazilian literature. And I have a favorite. It's Jorge Amado, the novelist Jorge Amado. I think his novels are incredible, even in English. And I've read some of them when they weren't translated either, and if they just hold up. So I would recommend him. Don't know what Again, I know a broken record here. I don't know what the translation status is for Jorge Amado. Once upon a time, there was a lovely set of mass market, of white bordered, white spined mass market paperbacks here in America, but I'm pretty sure those don't exist anymore. So I don't know what would the deal would be. All right, we're on to page 2. We're clearly not going to get all 5 pages done in one video, so I will do page 2, then I will stop, and then we'll do another video. Let's see here. Manahil Kaiser asks, have you read any Brandon Sanderson, anything beyond the Stormlight archive? And once again, I'm going to give you a slight break by not doing a 30-minute rant. Have I ever read Brandon Sanderson? Have I ever read Brandon Sanderson? Yes, I have read Brandon Sanderson. Yes, I have. I have read Brandon Sanderson. I read 150 pages an hour for an average of 10 solid hours every day, and I have for the last 50,000 years. Yes, I have read Brandon Sanderson, and I've read the Stormlight archives, and I've read a lot of the Cosmere books. And I like him. I like him fine. He's very nerdy, very energetic, clearly wants to please his readers. Let's see here. Laura Wicello says, what makes me most optimistic about humanity? I don't know if this question comes from all the doom and gloom about humanity that I regularly spout on this channel. And I do have an answer for what makes me most optimistic about humanity. And it's going to sound a little schmaltzy, but I absolutely believe it. Young people. Young people make me most optimistic. I rant about them plenty. Young people are very maddening. They are very maddening. More so now than at any point in my life. But they are also inhumanly capable. And they have the deck stacked against them in every possible way, which wasn't true of young people at any other point in American history. Young people today in the 21st century, in 2019, have the deck stacked against them in every conceivable way. Thanks to the previous generation, they are going to grow up in a seething, boiling hellscape of superstorms that wipe out half cities. They're going to grow up in a world choked by debt. They're going to grow up in a world in which 2 or 3 people are as wealthy as the next 5 million people. They're going to grow up in a world that is absolutely filled with nut job violence, gun violence. All of the problems that we're handing them are so enormous, and all of them are life-threatening. Look at the gun activist high school students in America. Look at the work that they have in front of them. And when you ask them why they do this work, they have a very direct answer: because we have to go to these schools. We're the ones who will die if there isn't changes in these laws. And so on down the line. All the way down the line. The world is right now at the very beginning of what is going to be an incredibly prolonged and incredibly much worse than it has been refugee crisis. And even the first beginning ticks of the refugee crisis that we've experienced in the last 4 years have been enough to strengthen or outright elect xenophobic right-wing autocrats in a half dozen countries. Imagine how much worse that's going to get when that problem gets worse. And they're going to have to deal with it. The young people, 18 to 25, are going to be, 30 to 45 in no time at all. And these problems will reach their peak then. So, and yet, I know a lot of those young people, and I've met a lot of them, and I believe in them. I think they are more capable. They're going to have to be, but I think they're more capable than any other demographic that I've met, coming up the line. So that is my sappy answer, young people. Let's see here. Manahil Kaiser is back. Thoughts on Thomas Wolfe. Thomas Wolfe, that is Wolfe, the early 20th century novelist, is great. He's absolutely great. He's fantastic. Not well enough read, not well enough known. No, at the moment, current, in America anyway, popular widespread editions of his 2 great novels. Penguin Classics, I don't think, makes them. It's an abeyance that really needs to be fixed. I'm sure that it will. How are we doing for time? Oh, goodness gracious. All right. We'll see if we can get to the end of page 2. Let's see here. Tatiana Pereira says, which Portuguese cities are my favorite? And Aveiro is the first answer that comes to mind. I'm probably not pronouncing it the way you would, but and it's probably a predictable answer for you too, because you're going to think, oh, it probably reminded him of Venice, and it did. It did. It's just walking around in a dreamscape. It was an amazing experience. And do I have any favorite Portuguese writer? And believe it or not, my favorite Portuguese writer is your own namesake, Virgílio Ferreira, who I like his novels just fine, but I love his journals. He wrote a long shelf of journals of like autobiographical volumes, dated autobiographical volumes that are fantastic. His essays are great too, and his book reviews, of course. But his journals, I just love. I just love them. So I would pick him. So you need look no further than your own last name. Let's see here. Reflective Rambling says, are there any debut authors who have surprised me with later growth? And there are plenty. It happens all the time. That's why I love debut novels. And the one that comes quickly to mind is Joshua Ferris, whose first book, And Then We Came to the End, is a fairly uninspired and formless collection of workplace gripes, of cubicle humor, that had me forecasting just the worst for the rest of his career, because that book was fairly popular. And he's done nothing but take chances since then. And every book, in my opinion, has been better than the one before it. So he'd be a good example off the top of my head. Are there any authors who defied the odds and produced more than one masterpiece? Yes. Yes, there have been. For instance, Thomas Wolfe. We were just talking about him. Look Homeward, Angel, and You Can't Go Home Again are two classics. They're two great books. But lots of other people, too, starting with Homer. And also, the Russians tend to do it on a regular basis. Vasily Grossman wrote Life and Fate and also Stalingrad. Tolstoy wrote War and Peace and Anna Karenina. Dostoevsky wrote Crime and Punishment and The Brothers Karamazov. But also, for Americans, there's also Edith Wharton, who wrote Custom of the Country and The House of Mirth, two great books, either one of which would be enough to hang a whole career on. So yeah, it does happen. Reflective Rambling also had a follow-up question. Go-to tips to tell a reliable biographer or historian. Depends on what you mean by reliable. Reliably readable, you have to read. Just read a chapter or two and see, is the author annoying you? Is the author talking down to you? Or is this a really sweeping effect? That's for readability. Reliability in terms of, the record, the research, you have to start from the back of the book. If it's no matter what the subject is, you go to the back of the book and go to their bibliography and see at the very beginning of the bibliography how many primary sources are cited. So if someone writes a biography of Pompey the Great, and you go back to the bibliography and all of the primary sources, all of the ancient writers who wrote about Pompey who actually knew him, who actually saw him face to face, if all of those sources are in translation, so the author of the book of this biography of Pompey did not read them in Latin, well, then you know something about this author. Whether or not the book is readable, whether or not it fulfills the first part of reliable, you know the second part, which is that this person is approaching the most valuable records about their subject through the lens of other people. That's not good. That's a mark against. Has to be. So yeah, there are a whole bunch of tips. I ought to do a whole video on how, but I don't know how many of you critically read biographies or histories, so I'm not sure how interesting that would be. Let's see. Eleonora von Genichen says, do you find reading in a foreign language affects your reading speed or enjoyment? What a great question. Yes, I do. It's been my experience that reading in some languages is faster than reading in others. Reading in some languages is more enjoyable than reading in others. And I couldn't quite put my finger on why that is. Of course, I read faster in Latin than in any other language. But, for instance, reading in Spanish is very, very enjoyable. I think because even on the silent page, it's so beautiful. It's just so beautiful that it's a wonderful feeling to swim your way through it. Whereas, for instance, reading in German, I don't mean to beat up on the Germans, but because especially since they bred the schnauzers. But reading in German is more of a concentrated thing. There's the dyed-in-the-wool Germans who are really fond of German literature will tell you that it's beautiful, but come on. There is a stern kind of beauty there, but it's a language that really wants you to concentrate, pay attention, and that tends to be a slower reading experience. But that's entirely subjective to me, I'm sure. There are more follow-up questions here. Did you learn a language in order to read more books, or read books in order to learn a language? I've never learned a language in order to read a book. I've never learned a language in order to read a book. The only reason that I've ever learned a language was because I needed it, not to read a book. And maybe a foreign language starter kit. Oh, God. Would there really be any interest aside from you and me? I don't know about that. Let's see here. Kenan Hadzik, Hadzic. A good one-volume history of World War I. I always recommend G.J. Meyer's World Undone. It's newish, 10 years old. It's available, and it's really, really good. So we'll use that. There are plenty of great one-volume histories of World War One, but I always recommend that one. It's broken up into little segments. It's got all sorts of thematic choices to it. Well done all around. Matt Crash says, "Are you a fan of Scott Snyder? And if so, which work?" And I have to say I'm not. I know that puts me in the minority. He's a comic book writer. At least I assume that's the Scott Snyder that you mean. I know that puts me in a minority, but to me he is so unforgivably wordy. Just whole pages of prose. That strikes me as inept. I mean, he's not inept as a writer. He's very good as a writer, but it strikes me that aspect of his craft is inept. If you're a comic book writer and the culmination of a big storyline of yours, like Court of Owls or something like that, requires page after page after page of solid exposition in order to make any sense out of what went before, then what went before needed to be reworked, and to an extent that you did not rework it. So I associate him with disappointing climaxes, because no matter how evocative his stories are in the beginning chapters, they always disappoint in the end. Maybe I'm just not cut out for his kind of comic book writing. Matt Crash also wants to know, where does the Bean nickname come from? I don't know. No idea. Felt natural one day to say Frida Bean instead of just Frida, and then it went on from there. Let's see here. Jen Uncensored says, "Do you still separate the author from the book? Is there anything that will deter you from reading an author's book?" I try not to. I try to read the book alone. The only thing really that will stop me is if the book is just diseased propaganda. In which case, unless I am commissioned to review it, I will probably give it a wide berth. But otherwise, knowing that the author kicks his dog, no, we're just about to get next month. We're getting a 2-volume box set, Library of America set of an author who, in real life, is a prize-winning SOB, just a horrible human being. But I'm going to go at the book. I'm going to go at the books. Some of those essays I haven't read in decades, so I'm going to go at it again, regardless of that. We have to, right? Who of us who of us would escape whipping if we had to be pure of heart to write things? None of us would write a thing. So I try. It's not always easy. Sometimes it seeps through. Let's see. Oh God. PRCZEK02. No idea if that's supposed to be pronounced or not. What is your favorite sitcom? It depends. It depends. It's such a Weasley answer. I don't. First of all, I don't watch modern sitcoms at all anymore. And I have loved a lot of them. Mary Tyler Moore, MASH, All in the Family. I've loved a lot of them. But I think if I had to give the answer, something that is just perfect, and that was perfect from the beginning in terms of acting, delivery, writing, absurdity, belly laughs, it would probably be Frasier. I would probably have to give number one to that. But it's tough. That would leave out a lot of things that I really love. And then Jacqueline Henry, I think? I can't read my own writing. Wants to know what I think of The Warmth of Other Suns by Isabella Willerson. I've never read it. The Daughters of Union County by Francine Thomas Howard. I've never read it. White Trash by Nancy Eisenberg. I rather liked it, although I thought some of its conclusions, the author doesn't actually draw official conclusions, but some of the things you're clearly meant to take as conclusions at the end of the book were a little facile. They tended to make me think that Nancy Eisenberg has done a lot of reporting about what is popularly known as white trash, but that she's never actually lived that life at all. And I think that showed in the final sections of the book. Ron Chernow's biography of Alexander Hamilton, it's a masterpiece. I love it. And Five Families by Selwyn Robb. I've never read it. So we're going to end these 2 pages on a defeated note, because half of those I haven't read. But we're already at a very long video, so I'm going to wrap this up and we will just move on. Sorry, I thought I could get this done in one video, but I am a little bit talkative. So I'll wrap this up and we'll be right back. Thank you, BookTube.